It is time to read one of my most anticipated books of the year. House of Flame and Shadow. Crescent City number 3. Today is February 4th and this book came out January 30th. So I just can't wait any longer to read it. I spent a week reading romance books to kind of get ready for Valentine's Day, but it's time. This vlog is gonna be spoiler free until we get to the very end, and then I'm gonna do like a little spoiler section so you can just click off the video if you don't want to hear spoilers. My mom already finished this book and she said that she would give it a 4.8 out of 5, which is pretty good, so I have kind of high hopes. Without further ado, I'm just gonna start reading this. I think. I'm like scared.
Will you listen to my confession? Could you become my redemption? When you kneel in that position and you pray for my submission, there's no halo on your head as you lay across.
I just finished a workout. Now I'm working on making dinner for me and my mom. But I thought I would talk about Crescent City and how far into it I am so far. I think I'm like 150 pages in, which I think is like only 15% because this is a long book. It wastes no time though. We jump right back into the action immediately. It's doing the thing where it like switches between a bunch of different perspectives. So it's like you get really into one perspective and then it ends on a cliffhanger and you switch to another perspective, which is smart, I guess, but it's annoying. I get into one and then it changes, and then I get into the next one and then it changes back. It's giving very like later Throne of Glass books because there's such a big cast of characters in this one now. And definitely I think you need to read A Court of Thorns and Roses and maybe Throne of Glass before reading this book. The rest of Crescent City, no, but this book, yeah. Which is kind of fun because I have read all her books. It's very graphic too, this book, which I guess Crescent City has felt kind of more adult the whole time. But there's certain scenes that are like actually, I'm like, ugh, like physically recoiling at the description. So thank you Sarah J. Maas for that. I don't know, I'm having a good time. I'm definitely like into it, but I'm not like, I don't know, crazy emotionally invested right now. I don't know why. I feel like it's almost like there's too much going on and too much like switching back and forth, but I still have like 700 pages to go, so hopefully that'll change. I also kind of feel like somehow, even though this is the third book in the series, we're getting a lot of like info dumping, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing, but my brain is like working overtime trying to process everything. I think talk about it more in the spoiler section at the end of this, but I'm very intrigued by the characters that are paired up in this also. I'm trying to decide if this cottage cheese is a concerning texture or not. I feel like it's fine. Anyway, I'm gonna read more tonight after dinner.
Feeling inside is like a burning fire to light me up and take me higher. I've never been too much of a believer, but I thank God that I finally found you. You're my heaven, you're my scripture, the most beautiful work of fiction. You're my altar, you're my sacrifice. I would die for your sins tonight, for your sins tonight, for your sins tonight. I would die for your sins tonight. Can I be your last temptation? Will your love be my salvation?
So it's been a few days now since I've spoken to you, but I am 55% into this book, which is like honestly like 500 pages in. I'm on page 525, but I think the Kindle version of this book is 930 pages, which is crazy, but also not crazy because it's a Sarah J. Maas book. I am struggling to figure out how I feel about this. Okay, I'm enjoying it. I want to make that clear. I am enjoying this, but I think I went into it with such high expectations that it's like very hard to meet them, particularly one because I just reread acotar, and acotar is like one of my favorite series ever, and also because I gave the first 2 Crescent City books 5 stars. I read them like 2 years ago now, so I don't know if that would change, but I think I did myself a disservice not rereading them before reading this book, because these characters I'm not like super connected to reading this story. Specifically Bryce and Hunt, for some reason in this book I just like don't feel that much for. I think my favorite character right now is Rune, and I think his romance subplot that's happening in this book is a lot more interesting to me. But I think it's like Bryce and Hunt are already like very established characters, so we're not really like learning anything more about them. Like we know everything about them, but I like don't really remember everything about them. I think that plus the way the second book ended, I had an expectation of how that was gonna transition into this book, and to me it felt kind of flat. I thought it was gonna be like my favorite part of this book, and I found it kind of boring. Other than the scenes in the dungeons, we have a couple of our characters that they're in the dungeons, the Asteri dungeons, because the Asteri are like the rulers of the world in this universe, and they're in the dungeons. And those scenes, I think I caught my reaction on camera to a horrifying scene. Like it is scarred in my brain. I'm sure if you read like horror, like gory books regularly, this is nothing, but to me I was like, that is graphic, and it caused a visceral response in me, which you can probably see in that clip. It's very similar to Throne of Glass, I think, the later books where you're like swapping POVs all the time, which you have to do to like get the whole story. But I think I might prefer first person sometimes because it doesn't feel like you're jumping around as much. Also, something that kind of annoys me in this book, and I feel like Sarah J Maas also did this in Throne of Glass, the characters will like hide things from you and then like reveal it later, but like you're in their head, so I'm like, did you know I was in there? It's like Bryce is gaslighting so hard that like her brain doesn't even know what she's doing until she reveals it later, you know? Because like I'm in her head and she's lying to me and I don't understand. And I know there's not really a way around that, because if it's like there's no other person in the scene whose point of view we could be in, I don't know if this is making any sense. Basically, there's a reveal sometimes of something that they were like planning or scheming on that they knew they were doing that was like in their brain, but I was also in their brain and I didn't know they were scheming. So I was like, they're lying to me. Like Bryce is actively lying to me in her brain. I am very tired. I ran today on the treadmill for the first time in like a week, and I'm trying to up my pace right now. And I just feel like I'm like specifically not built for running. Like I feel like there's people that can be like, I want to start running, and then they run a 5K, no problem. And couldn't be me. I could not be that less. Anyway, it's great. Like it's good. I cannot put it down. The last 2 nights I've been up far too late reading this book and I'm not gonna read anymore tonight. It's like 9:50 right now, and I'm trying to go to bed at a reasonable hour tonight because the last 2 mornings I have woken up regretting all my life decisions. That was a very rambly, maybe nonsensical rant about my current thoughts on this. I'm thinking right now, at least, I'm leaning more towards like a 4-star for this, which is still great. It's still good. So tomorrow night I am going to see the Book of Mormon, which I'm very excited about. I know nothing about it, to be honest, but I've heard really good things. That will also mean not really much reading time. I've been reading it on my lunch break, usually at work. So I'll talk to you later.
Pretending the constellations, and through time reincarnations, build cathedrals to your grace, paradise in your embrace. Feel it inside is like a burning fire to light me up and take me higher. I've never been too much of a believer, but I thank God that I finally found you. You're my heaven, you're my scripture, the most beautiful work of fiction. You're my altar, you're my sacrifice.
I'm spending the day downtown today, so I figured we can do my makeup and update on Crescent City, because I did not talk to you yesterday. I was not feeling great, which I think probably has something to do with getting home from the Book of Mormon after midnight and then waking up at 6 a.m. to go to work. But I did read a decent amount, so I think I'm like 82% in right now. A lot is happening. I think I'm definitely back into liking Bryce and Hunt more now, because I like that they kind of challenge each other, but they're still always really like respectful and caring, and you can see how much they love each other even when they don't necessarily agree at the time. And I remember that's kind of what I liked about them in the earlier books, is their relationship just felt very mature and like respectful. But Ruin is definitely still my favorite character right now, and I can't remember if I liked him this much before. I am going downtown to see Six today, which it is not a normal thing for me to go to 2 like Broadway shows in a week basically, but my best friend and I got discounted tickets and I love the music from Six, so we're going to see it. And we're also probably gonna go book shopping because there's a discount like used bookstore nearby where we're going, and then I really want to get Bride by Ali Hazelwood because for some reason my Indigo didn't have it the day it came out, which is very sad. I'm definitely really invested in Crescent City now because I think I said earlier it felt not like slow, but like there was a lot of like little things happening that didn't hold that much weight, but now like the big things are happening. We're definitely in the end like big battle sequence, you know. It is still kind of annoying to me that Bryce is hiding things all the time, but I think she's just done that from the start, so I kind of just have to deal with it. But again, like she did something very recently where I'm like, oh my god, and like her and Hunt are the only people that knew that they were doing that. This is all so vague, but I don't want to spoil it. I also really like Therion's storyline in this because honestly I think in the last few books he was always the perspective I liked the least, and at the beginning of this book I felt that way too, but I feel like he's really growing as a person in this, which is nice, and we are kind of finally seeing him stand up for himself and what he believes in. And also I think I said like there was the way the last book ended, I kind of had really high expectations and then I was kind of disappointed or like underwhelmed by it, but it kind of came back into play. It made a bit more sense, I feel like, now, because I was kind of like, what was the point of this? And I know there was a point to it. Like Bryce learned a lot of things on this little like trip she went on that was hinted at the end of the last book, and so it was important, but it was kind of boring. But then it like came back into play like just now basically, and to me it made it make a lot more sense. And I'm kind of seeing what the plot of the next acotar book might be. I must say the way Sarah J Maas connects everything and builds her worlds and like hints at something that 4 books before it becomes important is crazy. I can't fathom the way her brain works. Anyway, everyone's kind of split up again at this point in the book, but there's like an epic battle looming, and I'm intrigued as to how this book is gonna end and like if there's gonna be another book, because I think I don't know. There's 4 houses, right? There's House of Earth and Blood, House of Sky and Breath, House of Flame and Shadow, and then there's House of something else. There's one more. So far we've had books for every other house, so I don't know if there's gonna be another book for the last house, but at the rate this is moving I don't really see what that would be, because it feels like everything's kind of wrapping up, and that's kind of how I felt about acotar, because it felt like everything wrapped up in A Court of Wings and Ruin, and then suddenly new books came out. So I don't know. I'm actually surprised I have not been spoiled so far. I've seen a lot of people post like full spoiler reading vlogs, which I'm excited to watch when I finish them, because the book's been out for 10 days now. It's really long though. I'm on page like 800 or something, and I still have 20% of this book to go. I think I'll finish it tomorrow probably, since I won't really have time to read today, but I think it's gonna get to a point where I just simply will not be able to put it down until I finish it. I'm gonna take you on my little day downtown today because it should be fun, and it's so warm and sunny out right now, which like I know it's probably climate change, like I know it's probably global warming, but I'm so happy about it. We've never had a February this nice, but it's making me so happy because the seasonal depression hits kind of hard in the winter and I always forget, and then it comes winter and I'm like, why am I sad all the time? I need to pick out my outfit and then we need to leave. Oh my god, we need to leave like now.
So much more than books. Beheading, door, divorce. I had
I finished it. I am really struggling to articulate my thoughts on this. I'm going to try my best. I think for now I am landing on a 4 stars for this, which I need to make clear is a very good rating. Like, this was a good book. I was enthralled pretty much the whole time. I just had such high expectations for this that, like, for this I really thought it was going to be like an automatic 5 stars, and it wasn't. But 4 stars is still a very good rating. And if it were any other book, I would be very, very happy singing all its praises if I had given it 4 stars. But I have very conflicting feelings about this book. I think the third part of this was my favorite. I think that definitely kind of saved it for me a little bit, because I found the first part and the second part honestly a little bit slow and not really what I was expecting. Obviously the ultimate goal of this series is to free Midgard, their like planet basically, from the Asteri, who are like ruling evil gods, and there's all these revelations about who they actually are and how they got their power, where they came from and everything that we're really being drowned in. It felt like there was a lot of info dumping, which is kind of crazy because it's the third book. Like, this world's already built out, but we learned so much information in this book, and sometimes I really felt like I had to, like, my brain was struggling to keep up with this, and maybe that's something more about me. I don't know. And it definitely, I guess, needed to be 900 pages for everything that was crammed in here, but like also I think some things didn't need to be crammed in here. I really liked all of the side characters in this a lot, and I like that we got each of their perspectives, even though I will say sometimes I think the perspective switch felt off for me. Like, sometimes it would switch like mid-chapter and you're like, whose head am I in right now? So I struggled to follow it a bit. Again, this is a very like high urban fantasy world. So even with the first book, it took me a while to like kind of fully grasp the world and the characters, but it felt like I was starting from scratch reading this book sometimes. The ending of this was very nice. It made me cry. There was parts at the end that made me cry, but it made me way less emotional than the first 2 books. It wraps up pretty complete. So I'm not sure if there's gonna be another book, because I don't really see how there could be. With all that being said, I did enjoy it. I will read anything Sarah J Maas writes. I definitely think you need to read this series last out of the like the Massiverse, the MCU, the Maas Cinematic Universe, because this kind of connects everything, and the series is probably like the heaviest and maybe the least universally enjoyed. I started with Throne of Glass, and then I read acotar, and then I read this. I think a lot of people recommend acotar first, which I get because I think it's a little bit more appealing as an intro to fantasy, but I personally liked going in the order of the way she like published series, because you really see her grow as a writer. I think you can read either of those books, either of those series first, but I think you need to read both of them before you read this. That's all I'm gonna say, because I don't want to spoil anymore, but I'm going to go into spoilers, and this is your warning now. If you don't want spoilers, thank you so much for watching. You can click off now. I am going to talk about everything that happened in this book, pretty much, because I have thoughts, and thoughts that are very hard to articulate without spoiling not only this book, but the first 2 books as well. Final warning, we're going to spoilers. Obviously, House of Sky and Breath ended with Bryce entering the universe of acotar, right? It ends with the like, my name's Rhysand, and you're like, well, what? And then we go into this book, and she's there, and it was underwhelming to me. I like the first 30% of this book is just Bryce walking through tunnels under Prithian with Nesta and Azriel, and that's kind of it, and it felt dragged out. Like, at first I was really excited to be in Bryce's POV, because I was like, oh, she's in their world, and like we're gonna learn things and how it all connects, and that's cool. And we did learn things, but it felt like we learned them all right at the end of her time there, and then she just left. They were just walking around aimlessly for chapters upon chapters, to the point where I was like almost dreading going back into her perspective, because I was way more interested in what was happening like in the dungeons and stuff, because Hunt, Rune, and Vaxian were in the Asteri dungeons. I also have never been a huge fan of Tharian's perspective, but I think I said this earlier in the video. He grew on me a lot in this book, because at first every time I cut to his perspective I was like, like honestly I wasn't enjoying anyone's perspective that much, which is why I'm like so conflicted by this book, because by the end I was. Even by part 2 I was definitely more invested. I loved Rune and Lydia's story. I think that's my favorite part of this book. Rune found out that she was Daybright's Agent Daybright at the end of House of Sky and Breath, and their development in this book was so good and so interesting to read, and we got so much backstory on Lydia, like her sons and everything. I think was such an interesting plot point, and I honestly wish we had more of Lydia's perspective in this book, because I really, really liked her, and I really liked Rune. The scene in the dungeons where Baxian chews off Rune's hand. Horrifying. Actually horrifying. Ruined my day. I caught my reaction to that on camera. It's graphically burned into my brain and I wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't. I also feel like Bryce was kind of, I don't know if I want to say annoying, but she felt like almost, no, I'm gonna say annoying. She has the track record, obviously, of like forming plans and doing things and making decisions without telling anyone until like it happens and kind of just throwing everyone else under the bus. And that kind of pissed me off about her originally, but then I think I liked it more, or I liked her more in House of Sky and Breath. I liked her in Hunt more. But then in this one, it was like we went back to square one. By the end, I felt like she was coming back to like the Bryce that we got to know in House of Sky and Breath. So I don't know, her characterization felt a bit off for me. I did not really feel that much for her in Hunt in this at all. That might be because I didn't reread the first 2 books and I think I should have. I mean, if you're watching the spoiler section, you probably have read this, but if you haven't and you're somehow watching this, I would recommend rereading the first 2 books before you read this one. I also reread acotar, but I did not reread A Court of Silver Flames before I read this, and I think that also would have helped because the references to the trove, like the mask and the harp and everything, and it's all like connected because Bryce has the horn in her back, which is sister to the mask and the harp and everything, and then Nesta gives her the mask in the end to help defeat the Asteri, which I was happy about that because I thought it was just like the acotar world was just never going to come back into play, and it honestly to me felt like a waste of this book then for her to have gone there at all, other than like obviously she learned that the Asteri had originally conquered like the acotar world and then they got like pushed out by, you know, the Fae of that time. We didn't really learn like anything else, like how she can defeat them, how they defeated them, like none of that. So I was kind of like, why did she spend so much of the book there and why was I reading about it? But then when Nesta came back into play at the end with the mask, it felt a bit more like complete. I think it is good that this didn't fall into feeling like a crossover or like she was trying to write like another acotar book in this book. It was very much focused on these characters. It felt like it was a Crescent City book, which I think is good and I appreciate that. But I also feel like to an extent it felt like the acotar world was thrown in here. Nesta and Asriel were thrown in here for the sake of being in here. And then she gives the mask back at the end to Nesta because she exchanged her parents. She just left her parents in the acotar world to prove she would come back as like collateral basically. And so I can definitely see where the next acotar book is going because she also gave Nesta the Star Sword and Truth Teller, and she was like, go figure out why you also have an 8-point star on your skin, because that was like Bryce's core of her power and a sign that she'd had like the star power descended from the Fae from the acotar world that originally defeated the Asteri. It's like it hurts my brain a little bit to think about. There's like brief references to Throne of Glass in this, very brief. One with like the word marks, and the Underking I think is from that world, and so are the Shifters. I'm pretty sure like all the Shifters come from the Throne of Glass world, which I kind of guessed because all the Fae in Throne of Glass have alternate forms. So once they like released the hold the Asteri had on everyone's power in this, the Shifters developed elemental magic, which kind of proves they're from that world. I'm kind of curious if Ethan is like descendant of Rowan's kind of familial line because he has like the ice powers, and I'm pretty sure Rowan was like snow and ice. This ends very, very like happy, like very Court of Wings and Ruin kind of vibe, so I'm not really sure if there's a next book what it would be about other than like domestic life of them all like adjusting to this new world. Like Ethan is now the prime of the wolves and Hypaxia is the queen of the House of Flame and Shadow, and Bryce is like kind of, I guess she kind of removed all royalty from the Fae, but she's like the queen of the Fae. Rune is trying to run the Ox, and Hunt and Vaxian are trying to like figure out what the angels are gonna do now. So there's all of those that are like kind of open-ended, but not to the point where I feel like there needs to be another book. Tharion's arranged marriage in this was also kind of interesting. Probably the part that made me the most emotional was just like the found family vibes, especially like at the end when Hunt was like, oh, they were all working together to hold open the portal so we didn't fade into death in the black hole. That was nice, but again, it didn't really make me like super emotional, especially because Bryce was dead, and it's like, how many times can we kill Bryce, you know, and bring her back to life? How many times can we do that? And I know that Sarah J Maas just does that, like in acotar she did it to Rhys, she did it to Feyre, like they've all died and then been brought back. So when someone dies, I'm like, oh, it's fine. And actually no one really died in this, like no one that we care about. I don't know, can you tell that I just like, I'm struggling to process this. I'm definitely gonna have a book hangover. I can already feel it because I'm so attached to these worlds, but also I'm like the least attached to this world right now, even though I gave the first 2 books 5 stars. So I don't know if I need to reread them and see if I was just wrong. I think maybe later in the year I will reread the whole series because this is kind of a fever dream already in my mind. Oh, and Hunt being like a descendant from the Prince of Hell, or not descendant, like created by the Princes of Hell was kind of a cool plot twist. But then the like, oh, you were made for Bryce specifically to power her up. I was like, ooh, I don't know about that. And then I'm glad that didn't turn into like some annoying conflict where he was like, I can't be with you, Bryce, because I was made for you. It did not, honestly didn't end up being that big a thing. It was like a big revelation at the time, and then it was like, yeah, okay, he has lightning from Apollyon or whatever. And the Princes of Hell were cool, helpful in this. I like them. This book like drained me, honestly. Finishing this book drained me. So I'm excited for the next acotar book. I know Sarah J. Maas is writing that now. If you have read House of Flame and Shadow, let me know what your thoughts are. I'm very curious. Thank you so much for watching. I will hopefully see you in my next video. Bye.